record and share screen. All right. So, okay, here we are, everybody. Let me see if I can go to my dashboard. First of all, on my dashboard, there's this thing here, get ready to vote in 2020. I made this an announcement for you all because I want you all to make sure you are, please, registered to vote if you're an American citizen. If you need to vote out of state, this voter initiative here at MICA can help. I'm very proud to announce this was created by a former student of mine, and then another student who graduated last year really helped bulk it up by the name of Maddie Wolf. Some of you probably know her. You may not know this also, but MICA is actually has one of the best rates in the whole country of student voting. So you cannot let us down this year, okay? You've got to vote. And again, this initiative can help you vote where you can. The other thing I wanted to see here is, let's see if I can go to explore MICA. No, I wanted to go to events because, oh, here we go. Listen up, political people. On the 17th, we have Constitution Day. Here it is. Okay, I've actually I helped organize this event. So as you know me, know that this has been part of my job here at MICA for many years. This is the first year I've had to do it completely online. Usually this is in Falvey and it's bumping. But this year we have, the topic is justice in the vote. And we have three very interesting speakers who are going to talk about a couple things, including like the history of electoral politics, the continued relevance and need for, or lack of need for, the electoral college, right? Those of you familiar with how the American system works, it's not about the popular vote. Twice in the last 20 years, the presidential winner did not win the popular vote. We have an electoral system, and there are people who are very critical of that. There were reasons that our founding fathers instituted this, but maybe those reasons are no longer relevant. And then we have also, let's see, I don't see the speakers on here, but we also have an artist who, by the name of Imani Haynes, an MICA graduate, creator of the Million Woman March exhibition, and then Nike Robinson, who leads a very active voter registration group and mobilization group called Black Girls Vote. She's Baltimore based. And this is going to be 6:30 to 8 on Thursday night. That means tomorrow. So you can, pay attention. You have to register, but it's free, or we're urging you to register, but it's free. And you can listen in, and you are able to send questions. There will be a Q&A component as well. So, I recommend you listen in while you're chopping, cooking, or if you want to have a little beverage, adult beverage if you're 21, sit back, listen in, and it should be very interesting, okay? So I hope you will take part. Let me go back now to where I was. I want to look at your Canvas page. Couple things. I realized I did not have a link for the Zoom address, so I just created a link. So from now on, maybe just click right there and then sign in, and we can meet right away for our 4 o'clock meetings. I have everything on here for our Module 1 meeting. That was syllabus. And then this is last week's meeting. You all answered those questions. By the way, I thought that your response was really good. I was very pleased with what I saw. If there were any issues, I did leave comments. Canvas gives me the option to leave comments. So please look at those comments. They'll indicate what I'm looking for going forward if there was any need for comments, okay? I also put the Module 2 discussion up here, okay? Recorded, that is. And then here is where we are today. You answered questions, reading responses for Wendy Brown's chapters 5 and 6, okay? I'm gonna put the video up here from Module 3 when we're done. Here's your reading, here's your work for next week, okay? I'm really, really excited to take on this topic. I've never done this before. I've often thought a lot about the importance and the role and the political effect of policing, especially in democracy. I've never really researched it. And Of course, it became a major issue this summer. It has been an issue for a long time, but it really jumped to the front this summer. And so I thought it would be neat to discuss it head on. And I found a very nice little book by Alex Batal, The End of Policing. Okay, uh, I ended up, I wanted to find the digital format for you all, just of the chapters. All I could find was the whole book. So whatever, you're welcome. Enjoy it. Read it. It's not very difficult to read if you want to read the whole book. You don't have to. For you all, I want you to read chapters 1, 7, and the conclusion, okay? Very manageable. I think you will find the reading very pleasant. Well, not pleasant isn't fun, but not difficult, and his prose is pretty good. I thought it was really interesting. I've included 2 articles here that I thought were interesting because, you know, policing was in the news so much this summer. How America exports police violence around the world. I forget where I got this, but about the military-industrial complex and the way that we, you know, our arms industry and the way we conceive and understand policing in this country. We're not the only ones who are, you know, are guilty of police misconduct in the ways that we're noticing this summer. So I thought that was really interesting. And then here's another article, America's Cop Problem is Also a Gun Problem. Full disclosure, I wrote that article. I wrote it in the early part of the summer for the New Republic, and I was arguing that all these guns in society, in American society, is a really bad idea, and that's one of the reasons I think we're seeing, you know, one of the drivers of police violence, at least. You know, they have to. I remember I talked to the police chief here in Baltimore County, and he told me a few years ago. He said that, like, when police officers pull people over for even like a routine traffic stop, the chances that those people were armed, incidence has risen, you know, 20-fold in only the last 10 years. So what that means is that police have to contend with the possibility that people are armed, you know. Maryland has fairly decent gun laws, believe it or not, but there are many states that embolden gun owners, like stand your ground laws, and so that adds that's an additional problem. And for international students in this class, welcome to Gun Culture USA. Okay, read up on it, get to know it, love it or leave it. I recommend you leave it. Next, I have here your directions for paper number 1. I'm not going to go over these today. I'm going to do that next week, but they're there. Okay, so you may get on those anytime. You may start. Okay, I urge you to make an appointment with me if you want to talk about it at any point about, you know, if you want to talk at any point of your writing process. Happy to talk about ideas, happy to talk about organization. If you want a rough draft, you want me to look at a rough draft, I can do that, but the sooner the better, meaning this week, not next. I'll talk about this more next week as well, but the writing studio is up and running. I've talked to Michelle Glenn a couple times. There are some people in this class who've been talking to Michelle Glenn, which is awesome. She runs a writing studio. She's very good at her job, and they are very eager to work with you digitally, remotely. Okay, so for those of you who feel you could use that service, or those of you who definitely need it, please use it. All right, that's all I need to say about that business. Does anybody have any questions? Anything you need me to address? Anybody have any questions or comments about any of the business on Canvas? Anybody have any questions or comments about voting and Constitution Day? Cool. All right. All right, so let's get into it. Today, we have 2 major topics we got to talk about. Oh, by the way, I'm at MICA. They let me in the office. It's okay, but I had to get out of my house because I did not have peace and quiet, and my Wi-Fi was compromised. So MICA is letting us into the classrooms for a little while, and I have to say, it's pretty weird. They took my temperature when they came in, something like out of sci-fi, with a completely, what do you call that? It was like a heat map of my body, right, on a big screen. So, and then the library's closed. It's pretty quiet. Any case, let's get into it. 2 big topics for today. Citizens United, okay, and the atmosphere of speech and politics, or that environment, I should say, and then education, higher education in particular. Some of you were eager to get into that conversation last week. We kind of broached the topic a little bit, but there is a lot more to say, of course. So happy to get into that. But let's start, and as I did last week, I think I'm going to use the chat as the whiteboard here. Let's talk about Citizens United. I believe, is that 2010? Anybody know?
11.
2010.
11. Citizens United is a Supreme Court decision in the United States. For international students, the Supreme Court is one of the three major branches of government in the United States, exercises major power. The decisions can only be overturned by a 2/3 vote from Congress. By Congress, we mean the Senate and the House of Representatives together. 2/3 is an extraordinary majority, which means it's unlikely, very unlikely and often and rare that Congress is able to overturn Supreme Court decisions. So Supreme Court decisions are pretty consequential. I'm happy to talk about a little bit of the history of Supreme Court decisions over the last 50 years. There are many legal scholars and political thinkers who argue that the Supreme Court has gotten too influential. They've gotten too powerful. And we can discuss that too, but why don't we dive into Citizens United? So what did this decision say? And by the way, I think last week we used the raising hand option under participants pretty well. So if we could continue that way, that'd be awesome. Unless you can't figure it out, of course. So who's going to get the ball rolling here? What is Citizens United? Someone's got to do it because it ain't going to be me.
Can we just like jump in?
Oh, Ruben raised his hand. Sorry, he beat you to it.
Basically, it was the decision to give corporations the same free speech individual rights, or the same free speech rights as individuals.
Awesome.
Which basically gave them like hella power.
Hella power. All right, cool. Anybody else who wants to add on to what Ruben said? And my next question was going to be the implications. So if you want to talk about defining it or the implications of it, that would be fine.
I was going to add on how it permits corporations to donate money to like super PACs and overwhelming the election process.
Good. Super PAC. Political Action Committee. I feel like we discussed this last week, AKA a lobby. Right. Oh yeah, because I think Gabriel was talking about where the origin of that term lobbies comes from, right? That these are the guys who would sit in these are the smarmy fellows with the greased back hair sitting in the lobby of the Congress, doling out bucks for favors, right? Long before Citizens United comes about in 2010, there had been a lot of congressional work on what they called campaign finance reform. And believe it or not, John McCain, who died last year or 2 years ago, Senator John McCain, who Republican senator for Arizona, ran against Obama in 2008. He was one of the champions of campaign finance reform. And that didn't really do much. The idea was basically to diminish the influence of big bucks into Congress. And as we discussed last week, Congress people themselves will say that it's really a drag that they have to engage in all this fundraising. They spend all their time fundraising as opposed to legislating. And the Supreme Court kind of opened the doors here and overturned all these years of campaign finance reform by saying, nope, right, like Ruben pointed out, a corporation is like a person, and just as an individual can spend as much money as they want, so can a corporation. By the way, there are still limits on what you can give to candidates, okay? But these candidates, sneaky, they set up these things, they set up PACs, they set up these political action committees that they can be recipients of unlimited amounts of funds. And then guess what? The PAC can turn around and say, well, we like Trump or we like so-and-so, and we can blare ads for that person. And Colbert for a long time used to poke fun at this, about this idea of, you know, there's really not much of a wall between the campaign of an individual, of a politician, and these PACs, right? There is only a purported or pretend division. But really it opens, as Ruben pointed out, it opens the floodgates for the amount of money that can be spent on campaigns. Well, this is an issue for Wendy Brown. She brings us up in this book on neoliberalism. So I got to hear it. How does this decision express neoliberal values? How does the Supreme Court, how does Citizens United reflect neoliberalism or neoliberal values or neoliberal reason, as she put it? Who's going to dive into that one? Mason's clapping, but I'm not sure why. Oh, are you raising hand?
Yeah, I don't think
Oh, that's cool. Do it that way.
If I'm understanding correctly, I think a lot of Wendy Brown's argument regarding Citizens United was that it transmutes or transmogrifies, whatever her word was, speech into capital. And by giving it those traits, it kind of unleashes it as a force that like can't be right.
Right. Speech equals money. Good. Anybody else? How else does this reflect neoliberalism? Ruben?
Well, yeah, I was just gonna further that point, and neoliberalism is often about saying, you know what, you do have a voice.
Yeah.
Too. And then that's the idea that the Supreme Court was basically pushing their decision behind, was that it's a constitutional right. And so if they take this away from corporations, they're technically going against the Constitution.
Okay, good. Thank you. Chel Min.
I was just gonna say, like, it reflects neoliberalism in that it economizes the political sphere.
Good. Would you explain a little more what that means?
So like the way that I'm understanding it is that politics itself also just becomes like all about money, and like I think from the reading, Brown was saying that like free speech, this giving of money and stuff like that is now defined as like free speech, and it's like given the same rights as speech, and it's not about expression or like discourse, but it's about like innovation and being productive or something like that.
Good. I remember that quote. Yeah, let's get into that. Thank you. Let's take a look at the quote here, top of page 155. This kind of captures some of the stuff you guys have been saying. She says, certainly the Citizens United decision expresses neoliberal values in an obvious way. It erases the distinction between fictitious, that is corporate, and natural human persons in allocating free speech rights. That was, Ruben pointed that out. The decision subverts legislative and popular efforts at limiting corporate influence in politics, right? The Supreme Court came out and said, this is the law. And, you know, yes, it exists that, there is a constitutional provision that Congress can overturn this, but it's not likely anytime soon. And this decision overturns previous Supreme Court rulings aimed at modestly restricting the power of money in politics. This quote references the very opening of this chapter, page 151, where she is quoting Foucault, French philosopher who wrote one of the early books laying out neoliberal reason. And the quote from Foucault at the very opening of this chapter is that the juridical brings form to the economic. We saw this last week when we were discussing United States, when it occupied Iraq, it laid out the Constitution, and then afterwards, said, okay, now it can be a democracy, but only after certain juridical decisions had been made, which had huge impact, right, on the country itself. So they, the juridical decisions, they bypassed the democratic process, because it was taken for granted that these are best practices, right? That's the term she uses. Good. Right, and the consequential outcome of Citizens United says that speech is like money, and the authors and those who are the advocates of this decision also talked about a free market of ideas, right? And speech, just as money enjoys a free market, so must speech. And just as you may not, in economic terms for neoliberalism, just as the government intervention or government regulation is an unquestionable evil, so that is the case for speech as well. We cannot have regulations on speech, right? God forbid you open the door to regulations on speech. You must do all you can to affirm free speech. And the point is that if it really is a free market of ideas, then let the good ideas rise to the top, and they will beat out the bad ones. Okay. Consider her criticism here on page 161. She says at the top of the page, the problem with Citizens is not, as is often declared by critics of this decision, that corporations have been awarded the rights of individuals. The problem is that individuals as right-bearing participants in popular sovereignty disappear. When speech flows obtain the status of capital flows and all actors are seeking to enhance the value of their capital. I wonder if somebody can explain her critique. What is the problem with Citizens United in her view? How is this undermine democracy? It is a deregulation of speech. In a way, it is conceived as a greater opening and liberation of speech. So how is this problematic for democracy? Harley.
Probably because only some participants have money. So the corporations have a lot of money. I'm sorry, I might be a little bit lost because I don't know if I did the right reading, but
you know Citizens United, though. I know you know.
I might. Well, I know it from what you've said about it, but if you said to me Citizens United on the street, I wouldn't know what you're talking about because it sounds great in theory.
Yeah.
And corporations have so much money that they overpower everyone who doesn't have money because money is what's important and it's transactional. And Wendy Brown seems like she's talking a lot about this transactional relationships and transactional politics.
Awesome. Yeah. Gia.
I was going to say too that during the ruling, they kind of, I think, had a lot of trust and expected there to be more transparency and more of like a checks and balance system, but nobody, like that wasn't really put in place. It was just like, yeah, we'll know what they're going to do, but didn't make sure that happened either.
Okay. Thank you. Ruben?
To go off of what Harley said, not only is it money that is unfairly distributed, it's also influence. Corporations have a lot of influence, and it undermines democracy because, all right, say a corporation leans one way, well, what if that's your favorite corporation? Who's to say that doesn't influence you into liking who they like or voting for who they vote for, you know?
Awesome. Thank you. Laurel.
Sorry. I can't believe I just spoke on mute. Oh my God. So like what if the corporation is Facebook? What if it's Twitter, where they have algorithms that are allowing you to only see certain information, and only allowing like certain people who are like you to see the same information, and like is it then really your opinion, or is it just something that was fed to you? And that in itself is sort of like the opposite of free speech.
Awesome. Gia, is your hand up? Nope. Good. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to touch on something that Harley said earlier, which is that in theory, it sounds good. I like that. It does. It does sound good. She points out that, by the way, it was Anthony Kennedy who wrote the majority decision. So the Supreme Court, made up of 9 justices, must be an odd number so that there is a tiebreaker. Anthony Kennedy, right now the Supreme Court is leans conservative, 5 justices who are conservative and 4 who are liberal. Anthony Kennedy had been, like they called him, the swing vote. But he was less of a swing. In the last few years, he ended up especially leaning towards neoliberal causes, as she points out. He writes the majority decision, and the minority decision, she also quotes out, when you have a Supreme Court decision, you have a majority decision. There may be someone in the majority who likes to write an opinion. Sorry, there's a majority opinion. Then there may be someone else who writes with the majority, and then there is a minority opinion. And the majority opinion was written by Kennedy. The minority opinion was written at the time by Justice Stevens. He retired a long time ago during the Obama administration. Obama replaced him. Kennedy was replaced by Kavanaugh. He retired during the Trump administration. And Kennedy, in his majority opinion, says, issues an argument that a lot of, sympathetic people agree with, at least people sympathetic to his cause, which is that this is just greater egalitarianism, right? This is just equality. But she says that that's obviously problematic, as Laura points out, when you're dealing with, how am I supposed to speak on the same footing as Facebook, right? That seems crazy. And so this introduces, this decision is actually hugely inegalitarian. She says that the problem is, this reveals that neoliberals, they see equality, this is a quote on page 164, they, quote, see equality pertaining to rights distribution, but not to the effects of rights exercise. They see equality pertaining to rights distribution. In other words, everybody has the right. Okay, that's fine. But the way it's going to be exercised is going to look wildly different. There's no way I'm going to be able to exercise the right to free speech in the same way that Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook will. And she says that this is actually demoralizing democratically. How so? She worries that this will not actually encourage more free speech, but discourage it. This may not encourage people to speak out, but discourage them to speak out. Why? No? Nobody got anything? How is this going to undermine the culture of free speech? Ruben, bail me out.
I mean, it's such a broad question because there's multiple reasons why. Like,
Okay.
but
Give me a couple.
so like for one, hive mind. What people have been talking about earlier is like, if a corporation has a foot in the race or has free speech, and they start talking one way, well, that could sway a lot of votes. So hive mind is a problem. And then two, people already have an issue with voting and feeling like their vote doesn't count. So that only furthers it, considering the fact that you have no like you're not in competition with these big corporations. Like, it makes you feel like, what can I do as an individual? Is it pointless for me to vote?
Good. Awesome. Thank you. Min.
I was just gonna say that even just that speech now has a value.
Yeah.
I think that poses a lot of problems.
How so?
It doesn't become like a free and like a equal level discourse, like where people can present their opinions or their ideas, but it becomes like a marketplace about where what is it, capital, or like speech is capital.
Yeah.
And so like one will be inherently like valued higher than the other.
Yeah.
And then it opens up the doors for like just something like a monopoly maybe, or like I just don't see it like panning out well, where like
I like your introduction of monopoly here.
yes, or like I think like suppression of speech is what I was getting after.
That would be tragic. Let me just riff on what Cholmin said before I hand it on to Laurel here. But Marx claimed that unlimited or unfettered capitalism will self-destruct because who gets to compete the best? Because you cannot maintain a market of fair competition, right? We talked about this last week. The genius of capitalism, according to Adam Smith, is that competition. It's supposed to be, when you have good, healthy competition in the marketplace, that is good for the consumers, that is good for the workers and the corporations themselves, right? Consumers benefit because they get good prices, good products. Workers benefit because then they get hired by other places, or they, different employers will bid for their services. And the problem is, Marx noticed this, however, that certain corporations can get bigger than others, and as they grow, they compete better than others, and they compete so well that they can actually bowl them out of the marketplace altogether. And so that is one of the major arguments for why there should be government regulation to ensure that we have fair competition. And I think what Schulman points out is that something similar could happen here, which is, Kennedy and his ilk, they seem to naively think that in a marketplace of ideas, just throw all the speech out there and the best speech will rise to the top. And as you guys have pointed out, that's not necessarily the case at all, right? The loudest speech can rise to the top. The manipulative speech can rise to the top and crush all the little fish around, right? And then are we really the better for that? Was it Laurel, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna add that it kind of undermines what the First Amendment really is. It wasn't made for people in power. It wasn't made for corporations or the government. It was made for, in spite of that, for people with less power to criticize those institutions.
Excellent.
So to give that power back is sort of terrible.
And one of the funny things in this, not funny, tragic things in this chapter was she pointed out that Kennedy was so sympathetic to the plight of corporations, right, being oppressed. That was kind of outrageous. Ruben.
Yeah. So once speech becomes capital, there also can be incentives behind certain speeches. So like, there can be things like, if I say this for you, or say I'm a corporation, if I say this for this certain candidate, is this candidate gonna rub my back? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's also the exchange of the marketplace when it comes to free speech is that like there could be money behind certain things said.
Good. I like it. Yeah, that leads to the next point I want to talk about. Really, I mean, when she quotes Kennedy and all his, feeling bad, his sympathetic statements about corporations being oppressed, that's pretty damning. But for the longest time, I really thought the major problem, and I still think this is the best argument here, is that, I mean, Rubin has pointed us in the right direction. The key word here is corruption. It's corruption. And all the critics of Citizens United, they've asked for the longest time, how the hell did these justices not see this as corruption? If somebody spends gobs and gobs and gobs of money, isn't that going to amount to undue influence of a politician? And she points out that the issue is that the justices who approved of Citizens United, they understood corruption in a very, very narrow way. As this is on page 168, they understood it as dollars for political favors, like an explicit quid pro quo, right? I give you this money and you vote this way, right? That's pretty binding.
I mean, I think the exact quote, right? And I wrote this in my response was, influence over access to elected officials does not mean that these officials are corrupt. And I followed it up by saying this is like the most brain dead statement you could possibly make, right? Because what you're doing is you're obscuring the idea of favor and influence. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to find what I wrote here. Like, if elected officials are for the betterment of the lives of their constituents and the welfare of them, which strengthen them as a whole. So what happens is when you do a favor that is an individual action, right? Versus, you can't, for a community, you're doing sort of something over the whole. And when you think about the term of corruption, right? There's multiple different types. It could be you can be holding, the politician could be having an affair and you're holding that over their head. It could be maybe they're an incredibly passionate baseball card collector, right? Or maybe somebody even is holding their daughter hostage. But like, of how many corruption cases is that? Like, fractionally none. Right. So he's holding out on these completely, side examples, and then trying to recharacterize the word favor, as something that you do for a community. But no, you're actually doing the job.
So I put a name here in the chat. His name is Sheldon Adelson. He's one of the biggest political donors in the country right now, Republican political donors, and he's based in Las Vegas. He's a casino mogul. Anybody heard of him? He's pretty ancient. I think he gave something like $500 million to the last campaign for Trump. The Koch brothers gave $1 billion. So does he need to say anything? Right? Here's 500 million to Trump. I think everybody on earth knows what Sheldon Adelson's agenda is. Well, first of all, I'll tell you two that I know of. He's pro-casino, anti-labor. Actually, you'd be surprised, in Vegas, labor is the power of the unions are pretty powerful. These gambling unions are pretty powerful. And he's also, where I know him better, is he's ardently Zionist, pro-Israel, and in terms of an expansive Israel. And so, again, you don't need to tell Trump that these are the terms of the deal. Trump knows the game. Any politician knows the game. These are the expectations. You're getting money from this person. Oh, by the way, you're not getting any old amount. You're getting $500 fucking million. Does it need to be stated? Do we need to have a contract where it's signed that you will do X for X? The expectation is huge. The pressure is huge. You all know the Koch brothers. They run the largest private corporation in America in terms of oil. variety of the petrochemical industry, variety of services, and their agenda items, deregulating environmental laws, combating unions. This is all well known. So that if you're a politician, you receive their generosity, their expectations that you play ball, and this doesn't need to be stated.
Have you read?
Hang on, Ruben. Hang on, Gabriel. Ruben has his hand up first. You're next.
I was gonna say in my response, I actually argued that I don't necessarily think it's a misunderstanding or a underestimate of corruption. I think they chose to ignore it because of the optics. I felt like it became a polar decision whether you were fighting for the Constitution or you were fighting against it. I think also if they would have made the opposite decision, they would have had to acknowledge that corruption is alive and very much popular today. So I don't necessarily think it was just like, oh, we only know this type of corruption. I think they know exactly what's going on. It's just the fact that it's the lesser evil to pick in favor of corporations.
Good. Thank you, Ruben. Well, I'm very sympathetic to your point. That's not actually, Wendy Brown ends up with a different argument, which I have to touch on, but I am sympathetic. I mean, the system is already awash with money. Why send everybody to jail? Let's just legalize the whole thing. That's not a bad idea. Gabriel, you wanted to say something else?
I just wanted to ask if you read the book Dark Money by Jane Mayer.
No, but I know of it.
Okay. Yeah, I read that a long time ago. Super upsetting.
Yeah. Yeah, it is super upsetting. I mean, she makes the point here that, corruption is something very difficult to root out of politics. It's not easy when you have, cleansed a system of corruption. That's a very difficult thing. I can't tell you how many countries in this world, you've probably visited some that are mired in corruption, where you have to basically spend a little money to get any kind of basic public action done. And I mean, like getting a driver's license, or if you're pulled over, paying off a cop. There are many countries in this world where the system is corrupt through and through. And we, in the States, until recently, we've done a pretty good job of keeping corruption out of the public sphere. But Citizens United is one way in which this has been invited. I mean, how else are you supposed to run for office now? If you're going to run for office, she quotes, I think this was in Stephen's Minority Opinion. He said, look, you know what you're doing here, right? You're going to flood the market with money. Basic economics tells you that the prices of like TV ads, it's going to go through the roof. Who the hell is going to run for office? Who can run for office? This has been well documented. The number of millionaires in Congress, it's by far the majority. You have to be a millionaire to run for Congress. Let's take it a little further with respect to corruption here. This definition, she says, is too narrow. This is on page 168. But she tells us something else on 169 that is, I think, pretty interesting, which is that this is now, I'm speaking to what Ruben was saying a minute ago. Why didn't Kennedy think this was corruption? And basically the reason that he didn't think this was corruption is because of the larger point is that neoliberalism had already infected the system, okay? And this is what she says in the middle of 169. What exactly is Kennedy claiming about political influence in McConnell and reaffirming in Citizens? He begins with the simple point that elected representatives naturally favor voters and contributors who support the policies that the representative favors. But already this suggests that one elected to office is not representing a district or constituency, but rather responds to and favors the people and money corresponding to the positions she or he holds. And then Kennedy argues that the only reason for vote or to vote for, give money to a candidate, is that the candidate will respond by producing the outcomes the voter or contributor desires. She repeats this word several times. Responsiveness, all right? That is what constitutes public service. If you are a public official, your job is to respond to voter concerns. And you see what this does? This already puts speech and votes on the same terms with money. So, in other words, Kennedy didn't see corruption here because he already understood public service in terms of responsiveness. You just do. If you're an elected official, you just do what people want you to do. And she's very troubled by that. Why? What's wrong with the whole notion of public service as responsiveness? Harley?
You can't do what everyone wants you to do all the time. There's no way to make everyone happy. You have to eventually tell your truth and your side of the story, however mad it makes everyone. It has to exist on its own.
Good. Thank you. Ruben, this is the Ruben show today. You're feeling it. You're feeling it. Go for it.
Yeah, I like this topic, and me and my roommate have been talking about it a lot. But I mean, the problem with what Harley said is that neoliberalism never comes off as genuine, because you cannot, like Harley said, you cannot appeal to every side. There is no way that's possible.
What should you, when you're electing an official, what should you be electing? You know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? Like, who should you be electing? What kind of person?
Well, I mean, you shouldn't even be electing a person. You should be electing policies, you know, but
okay.
But this is the thing, they never stick to policies. Then they start doing what we're talking about, being responsive.
Well, I'm going to go in a little different direction here, because I think if you think in terms of policies, you're still on shaky ground. Let me explain why. I mean, the way she describes that Kennedy understands elected officials is that their job is to do what constituents want. What do constituents want? That can vary. So what does this mean for the official who's tasked with doing what constituents want? What does that mean for this person? You know what I mean? Is there anything there? Right? I think you were kind of getting at that, Ruben, with what you said a minute ago. Like, what kind of people does this system arrange as your public officials? Are these people with backbone? Are these people with character, virtue, courage? Right?
Sleazy people.
Yeah. In fact, it insists only on sleazy people who are, what's the term? Yes men, right? They're yes men. Like, they'll hired guns. I don't know. The word prostitute came to mind. Sorry. You know, like, you're just hired. Just shut up and do your fucking job and don't think for yourself. And I don't care what your own moral sensibilities are. Just do the job. My vote, that money says you must do X policy. Shut up and do it. Right? What happened to well-rounded, thoughtful human beings who can occupy these positions? You know what? Human beings, they pay attention to details. and settings and environments, and they change their mind sometimes. That sometimes happens if they think the times and the setting require it. So I'm pushing back a little bit against Ruben here, also in that, like, if you're only voting for someone because they support a certain policy, that still sounds transactional, right? And I know Ruben is taking me serious because he's on his stoop now smoking, right? I got him. But, right? What do you think? I mean, I think the political environment as a whole has gotten away from this idea that you are to, no one knows everything, voters and politicians alike. Aren't you supposed to be electing a person who you hope can deal with whatever shit comes their way? And hopefully this is a thoughtful, moral person with a conscience. All right. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Or am I right as usual? Is that what you're going to say?
I would say the reason why I said I usually look at policies is because I've always known that you can't trust these people, and they're not people of character. So then the next step down is like, well, at least can I believe in their policies? And it's hard because that'd be bullshit too, So it's like, how do you vet the voting? Like,
it's a great point, Ruben. I mean, but see, this is why our founders did two important things when they wrote this Constitution. First of all, let's talk about the electoral system for a second. The way the Electoral College is supposed to work is not the people who voted in the president. It is these things called electors. The way the system was originally developed, but quickly abandoned, was that you as an American citizen would vote for an elector. And an elector was someone you knew who had you thought was virtuous, upstanding, had a good soul, and would make, in turn, the right decision to vote for president. Okay? The second thing, this country, and Jefferson was very critical of this and upset at the very beginning, this country was meant to be, at its basis, a very vibrant local democracy, where democratic politics happen at the local level. And you know what that means? You will know your elected officials. So Ruben raises a good point. In a national, and there was already tensions about this when the Constitution was laid out. This is the big fight in the Federalist Papers, right? Can we make this kind of democracy in a country that's going to be very big and end up being much bigger than they even thought, right? But Ruben's right. Like, how do you judge a character of someone you don't even know, you never see? In a way, the policies are the indication, right? How to vote for that person. That's what we have to do. So it's tough. It's tough for sure, right? Gia.
I was kind of thinking about something too, how, like, yeah, we have to rely on the policies, but a lot of the times they're not followed through on, like Ruben had mentioned. And I never thought of this before, but is there any like regulations in place for making somebody like accountable for their word and their campaigning at all? Or is
just the vote?
Yeah.
Just the vote, right? Can't think of anything else. Go ahead, Gia.
Oh no, we're good.
Let me see if I understand you correctly. You're asking if there is some kind of regulation that would keep politicians to their word.
I guess like more so in terms of campaigning, where like, is there a form of like a contract or document that's like, hey, this is what I set out to do. That's not just a commercial. It's not on a sign or something. I never thought of it before that way, because you almost would expect there to be that.
Yeah. Well, along those lines, back in 1994, when the Republicans took or 96, when the Republicans took over the Congress, that was Bill Clinton was president. Their leader at the time was a guy by the name of Newt Gingrich, who you've probably heard of. And Newt Gingrich came up with, he called this a contract for America. And it was a plan that they came up and they said, we're going to stick to these things, right? So they overtly spoke in contractual language at that time. Not the exact context you're talking about, but they've certainly spoken that way. Harley, you had your hand up.
Well, I was going to say, if the way that we're rewarding people and the way that we're getting people to do things is with money, then why not hold them accountable with money?
How?
Just an idea. Oh, I don't know, making them pay for the things that they've done, but like literally pay, like actual money. Just an idea. It's just a far out.
I think you do, in some responsiveness, ask scenarios, you do pay. Like if the Koch brothers like elected Trump and they didn't do the things that they implicitly said, they'll either possibly like stop providing that monetary incentive, or I guess they might double down, in which case I wouldn't know, but I feel like there's not laws that hold politicians accountable, but there's like these weird implicit other things, like it is also money, but it's also like support from people. It's also how people talk about you. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, Harley. You're on a different planet right now. But I'll tell you what comes to mind. I mean, badness comes to mind. But what comes to mind specifically is that certain corporations, they have already included in their budget payment on penalties. And I mean, in particular, like environmental lapses. This has been well documented, so they may just consider this another cost of business, especially we're talking about these multinational corporations. They have so much money. This is nothing for them. I am far more equipped to imagine the opposite, right? Let's all take a trip and let's imagine the opposite situation where, the rough sketch of the campaign finance reform from McCain was something like this. And various other campaign finance reforms they've been riffs on this. This is, again, anybody interested in the final research topic, this is an awesome one. There are various proposals out there. It would be that you would either rely entirely on public funding to do your campaigning, or there would be public funding matching. There would be matching funds that come from some kind of public piggy bank. In either case, this will drastically limit the amount of money you can spend. How would this change things, right? Then, I've been reading right now that, I don't know if you guys saw this, but Bloomberg, God, what did he give to Florida? He gave to the Biden campaign some ungodly amount for advertising in Florida. Gabriel, did you know? Ches, you were starting to speak up. Do you know how much that is?
Yeah, I stepped out for a second and I was still thinking about this conversation. I was like, didn't Michael Bloomberg run and had just an exorbitant amount of money, but nobody liked him, but he was just kept afloat by all this money?
Well, what he ended up saying is that he will spend unlimited funds to unseat President Trump. And part of his commitment was, even when he lost his nomination, he says, I'm going to give the money to Biden. And I believe he said this week he's going to spend $5 million in Florida alone. So you're going to get a shitload of ads on TV, I guess, right? The TV market loves this shit. But if you were talking about the opposite scenario, it's all public funding. How are these guys going to get their message out there?
I think when you reduce the amount of funding that you have to begin to rely on volunteers and volunteer networks, individual people to go around, to knock on doors, to hand out pamphlets, to take the time to be individual with each voter. I think that's what the Sanders campaign was so good at, right? Was mobilizing people and realizing that is far more effective than sort of the TV and advertising or doing ads on the other platform. And I think that that's the right way to do it. I think that allows us to create personal connections with the people who are volunteering. It provides, there's sort of physical connection between me and the candidate. And it's possible. We know it's possible. You spend your money instead of ads on organization. I think that would be the ideal way to have things.
Awesome. Anybody else? Thank you. I think that's a great idea. Networks of volunteers. Any other ideas how you're going to get your message out?
I mean, the ideal scenario would be like you are a virtuous person and you are a person of this great virtuous character, but you also have enough money to beat out the corrupt people who are also using money against you. So it's like, I feel like the crowdsourcing and the crowdfunding of Bernie Sanders was almost there, almost enough to beat out everything else, because there was just, it was the money from just individual donations was almost enough to do that. But then something in there just didn't, work out. And I guess there's the proliferation of your message, and then there's also this other like meta game that you're playing at the same time, and it's like this weird thing.
So you're always going to need some money. The second Gabriel points out. Mm-hmm. Anybody else? I think the first Gabriel, I'm going to call you Gabriel 1 and 2, points out, yeah, I mean, God, it must be exhausting to be, it's also exhausting to be a candidate in the old system. You had to shake hands, walk around.
I liked how back then the presidents, they had a campaign train.
Yeah, I know.
And then they would go from county to county. And there's so many like great pictures of old candidates like going on trains. Yeah.
Public spaces, going to public squares where the people are convening and talking there. That's another way to do this. But yeah, it's interesting to think how this would look. And by the way, other countries do have these laws. The European nations, they have campaign finance laws. I know Britain does, for example. So again, this is an interesting research project if you wanted to look more at that.
I have a question.
Go for it.
Do you think, what is an example of a non-corrupt country, like government? Is there any non-corrupt government?
I don't think there are any that are non-corrupt, but there are like, I forget who's done this ranking. I think the UN did ranking of countries least corrupt to most. So you can find
Who's top, like Denmark or like Finland or something?
Probably the usual suspects, the Scandinavians. They tend to be very non-corrupt. Yeah. I believe Cambodia is the most. That sticks in my mind for some reason. There you go. Gabriel Jacobs put it up for you. But it's a good question, Sarah. Will you ever completely get rid of corruption? I think there's a good argument that you won't. Because I'm thinking of those countries that score extremely well in corruption. Even in those places, the people who end up running for office, they tend to have big pockets, maybe for the reason that Gabriel Ches mentioned. You can't get away from the fact that there's going to be some kind of an elite for reasons we'll talk about in a second. Ruben, and then Harley.
I was actually going to touch on those reasons. We got to think about the fact that countries like America were built off of corruption. They were built off of slavery. They were built off of this idea that if you are not the owning party, then you do not have any power in this country. So how could we ever expect this country to not be run off of money?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like when this country was founded, when we said this thing about freedom, it was not for everyone. Right. It was for those who were already free, who already had this power.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. Harley.
I'm glad that he went first, because I was going to say a similar thing about, like, if you look at that map, it's about money. It's about colonialization. It's about who was there first and whose land was taken and whose, I don't know, resources and people were taken. I don't know. That map makes me have a lot of weird feelings because it's like, I don't know, the dark red is the worst, but it's a lot of the poorest places.
Yeah.
That's not fair.
Mm-hmm.
What do we do about that? That's an open question that doesn't have an answer, but I don't know. Yeah.
Well, we're going to read Fukuyama in a few weeks, and an earlier book that I used to teach I like very much. He talks about it's about corruption in democracies and how it undermines democracy. And he points out that even, you know, I'm not looking at the map, but I can guess the countries that fare that do well in terms of corruption. Hey man, it was not long ago they were dealing with shit. Okay, the history of the United States is extremely interesting in that regard. You know, in the late 1800s, the robber barons dominating industry and commerce in this country. I spent last summer, I was reading about the emergence of the union movement. I mean, this was a long, bloody battle, you know, and I go back to the point I said earlier, like, you're never completely free of corruption, you know, ever. It's a matter of degrees. But from a political standpoint, just like a pure pragmatic standpoint, corruption is a problem. It really undermines a democracy. And if you're interested in studying this more, I'll recommend the Fukuyama book for you. He talks about, you know, living and working in some of these countries that score poorly. It's very frustrating. It's very hard. You know, there's so many things we get to take for granted in this country, you know, that I don't have to pay off a cop, you know, when I get a traffic speeding, or I guess I could. I've never tried. I don't think I will. But, you know, or when you go to the DMV to get your license, you don't have to like slide some money under the window, you know. There's still ways to game the system and make it work better for you in this country, but there are many egregious acts of corruption we get to avoid in some ways and in some sectors, you know, and I'm speaking, of course, from my limited perspective as a white suburbanite. So, you know, again, you know, as you guys pointed out, like this experience can vary, you know, but I don't think you can ever really expunge corruption from democracy. I just don't think you can. You're always going to have degrees of it.
I don't know. I mean,
these are made because democracies are comprised of humans, you know.
I mean, sometimes it's just like, I know there's a saying like corruption like greases the wheels of government, right? You get things to move through and not be blocked. So like, is there an argument for like a little bit, just a small bit of corruption, sometimes necessary to move things forward?
Gabriel, that's if you think that democracy should run efficiently. And I often come back to this point that I think that's a dangerous misconception. Democracy should not be efficient. She points at, I mean, Wendy Brown points that out in one respect about neoliberalism, right? Neoliberalism expects, one of the reasons, you know, neoliberals get upset with government because they say it's inefficient, that it's slow, it's ponderous. Well, when it is efficient and running quickly, you better beware, because who's it running well for, right? When democracy really is taking into account everybody's voices, this is going to be a slow, sometimes torturous process. You know, it just is. Beware efficiency. I don't know. That's what comes to mind, Gabriel. Anybody else want to chime in? Good. Let's talk about neoliberalism and your education. I think this is fascinating stuff. I've been talking about this for years. We touched on this last week a little bit, but let's get deeper into it today. This is chapter 6. You know, and she's concerned with the demise of widely accessible higher education, which was formerly viewed as a public good. And what's interesting is, you know, this is God, this whole debate about higher education had come into relief so much with COVID. And one thing I've discovered is this is not an American problem. This is, or not only an American problem. Neoliberalism has greatly infected the way universities are run throughout the English-speaking world, for sure. Other countries, I don't know if I can speak to this, but not only, this, for reasons she talks about, universities in this country are in economic crisis, and some may not survive. In Britain, they are talking about 10% of the universities going bankrupt. Australia, New Zealand have similar problems. And it has to do largely with the business model that in the neoliberal spirit has caught on. She says that, we talked about this last week. This is a quote on top of page 177. Democracies are conceived as requiring technically skilled human capital, not educated participants in public life and common rule. Human capital, and she opens a chapter quoting the president of Cornell, right? This is what we do. We produce universities, we produce human capital. Capital for me and capital for you. You have to be something that you can invest in, and you have to be something valuable for the market. And she says that neoliberal influence on education also transforms people into, quote, self-investing human capital. Talked about this last week. I think that's really fascinating subject. I'm imagine you guys feel the pressure of that quite a bit. Oh, Gabriel Shez dropping the bomb. All right, I'll talk about that later if you want. Let's see here. Okay, in case you didn't know, the faculty voted no confidence against administration. I'll talk about it later if you're interested. But I got to cover some stuff here first. She describes this in the middle of page 177, what this looks like. Well, we talked about this last week. I'm not really going to get into this. I mean, this is responsibilization comes home to you. This idea of responsibilization, love this term she hits on the last week's reading, which is, you at the bottom of the pile. And the individual is responsible for his or her own welfare and fate. You're your ultimate safety net. The state-run safety net is diminished or gone. And you are your greatest cheerleader and marketer. You have to get out there and sell yourself all over the place. And I am awful at this. And, I've been sitting here at Micah for 15 years watching this college evolve, and all these different agencies and career centers come up, and they're going to teach you to be entrepreneurs and sell yourself, right? Because your parents are paying big bucks, and God forbid you're not able to get a job. That would completely suck, right? Look what else she says. But before we dive into that, I thought this quote was really interesting on page 179. I kind of want to unpack this if you have your text close by. Take a look, please. She says in the middle of 179, at the same time, neoliberal rationality reduces the meaning of freedom and autonomy to unimpeded market behavior, and the meaning of citizenship to mere enfranchisement. Here's what this means. Freedom and autonomy to unimpeded market behavior. You are free to buy and to sell. It reduces the meaning of citizenship to mere enfranchisement. You are a citizen so long as you vote. That is a tragic impoverishment of how Thomas Jefferson imagined it, by the way. She goes on, the evisceration of robust norms of democracy is accompanied by unprecedented challenges to democratization, including complex forms and novel concentrations of economic and political power, sophisticated marketing and theatricality in politics, corporately owned media, and the historically unparalleled glut of information and opinion that, again, produces an illusion of knowledge, freedom, and even participation in the face of their opposites. I want to talk about that last sentence there for a second. A glut of information that produces an illusion of knowledge, an illusion of freedom. Why does she say that? Well, I think we can all agree what this glut of information is. It's called the interweb, right? And all the shit that's flying all over the place on digital media. There's lots of knowledge out there. You feel more knowledgeable for it. She says there is an illusion of freedom there. Why she say that? Illusion suggests not really so free. How does this glut of information undermine your freedom?
I think my dad was talking to me about sort of the psychiatrist about sort of this phenomenon of having too many choices restricts you, right? We talked about going into Trader Joe's. Well, not Trader Joe's, sort of a more big market chain. And you go to get marinara sauce, right? And you go into that aisle, and then before you are 20 different types of marinara sauce, right? Variety, with garlic, without garlic, chunky, with not chunky, but then on top of that, then each of the different brands have their own permutations of it in different sizes. And you sort of freeze up because every one that you can pick, you sort of second guess yourself. And it takes longer for you to pick which one you want if instead there were two or just three, because then you would have more confidence in the pick that you make.
I like it. Anybody else? Ruben.
I wanted to make a different point about the information or the education that we get.
Mm-hmm.
The point I argued, which was about the humility aspect of it, was that in American education, there is no more like love or like need for learning in an organ. It becomes this need to be right.
Yeah.
In the way that you're only getting information or you're only wanting to be at school so you could be right. And I think that is the issue with a lot of teaching, because it holds the teacher or the professor as the person in power, as the ultimate, because they are knowledge, so they are the one that are deemed right, basically.
Nice. All right, I'm going to marry these 2 points together. Kind of unexpected, but let me put it this way. Anthony Kennedy could feel vindicated right now looking at, the digital universe and saying, look, there's a shitload of speech out there, right? Look what I did. Look what I encouraged. It's on one hand, it looks like there's plenty of speech out there, but Gabriel points out, you can certainly feel inhibited or chilled by all the speech out there. And of course, the key task is, how do you navigate it all, right? And so that's why this is an issue of education. And the big question is our education system making us, or making democratic citizens, able to negotiate and navigate the glut of information and to navigate it well, right? To Gabriel's scenario of sitting in the aisle looking at all these marinara sauces, I would ask, well, how can we make this quicker for a person, right? How can we make this quicker? Well, advertising seeks to make it quicker by pushing certain brands up to the top. But, you as an educated consumer, you might decide, well, I'm gonna boil it down to which ones have organic ingredients, or I'm going to look to see which have sugar, high sugar contents, etc. And you can see, my point is, you can speed this process up, and it doesn't have to take forever, but it relies on a certain kind of perception and analysis. And the question is, does our current education system give us the tools to analyze these things? Okay, and that's where we hand off to Ruben, which is, she has a lot to say about the attack on liberal arts, right? And she thinks that this is highly problematic. Liberal arts would be that division or that domain that produces citizens who understand how to navigate the glut in front of them. Okay? We have a situation where people get caught, they get lost in the glut. Okay? Liberal arts, let me just say a word about what that means. Well, actually, before I do that, you know, let's be very clear on what her critique is. Her critique is that, you know, education has increasingly become about technical skill and job training. Okay? You have to go into college. Why do you go to college? You go to college, you get a job. Well, I have news for you. That is a recent conclusion. That is not the way it used to be. The name liberal arts indicates what the purpose of it was. The purpose of a college education used to be to set you free. It used to make you free. It used to be to make you free. And the education you got along the way was to edify you. But it did not, would it prepare you for a job? Oh yeah, sure. But it was not simply like plug and play, right? Nowadays, that's become increasingly the case. So universities, at least in the West, they were nothing but liberal arts not long ago. And by liberal arts, we mean history, literature, philosophy, in some, well, most of them, there was also theology. These are all the soft, right? The liberal arts, these are the ones right now that get a bad reputation, right? How are you gonna get a job with that, right? I was a philosophy major in college. People say, how are you gonna get a job with that? Well, fuck you, I got a job, okay? And I'm rolling in it, okay? But, you know, that's the question they asked, but that was not supposed to be the question. That was never supposed to be the question of college. It wasn't supposed to be what's your job going to be. Now, increasingly, you see these degrees are, you know, colleges advertise and they brag about the degrees that are specifically engineered to a job. So right now, you know, here at MICA, we're next to University of Baltimore. Their latest degree offerings, I notice, are about cybersecurity. They're going to get you a fucking job, right? In cybersecurity. You can work for the NSA, walk right in. The most extreme example I've seen, there is the first casino in Maryland about 10 years ago is in Harford County, up the road. Is anybody in this class from Harford County? Good, because I'm going to trash Harford County. Not a big fan. It's actually in Cecil County. Anybody from Cecil County? Good, it's worse. Cecil County is a kind of shitty county, known for the Ku Klux Klan, up on the way to Philly. And they got themselves a casino a few years ago called the Hollywood Casino. I'll give you a hint. It looks nothing like Hollywood. And when they built that thing, the community college in Cecil County came up with a special major the year after. And it was, I think it was like gaming engineering or something. Gaming, it was so pathetic. It was about how you can work in a casino, right? I have to look up the title for you all. I'm a little rusty here, right? As if you need a degree for that, and as if that's the only reason you go to college, okay? This is in her view, this is a great impoverishment of the purpose of an education, right? So some of you touched on this last week. I realized I'm just going to keep going for a while, whatever. If you have any problems with that, let me know. A lot of you talked about this last week, how MICA has changed, right? Well, not since you've been here, since I've been here, you guys expressed similar concerns, and rightfully so, right? Your tuition is outlandish now. You can't just walk into college and be like, teach me whatever, right? You have to go in and you have to pick a major that gets you a job. And what are the top majors at MICA? Come on.
It's graphic design.
Yeah.
Illustration.
Yeah. Those are the two big ones I know. Harley, were you going to say something?
Yeah, it's illustration and graphic design, and those ones sometimes you have to work for people who decide the content, and you just do a lot of the labor. That's just a thought I have sometimes.
Hmm. So when I got here 15 years ago, the college was in the middle of a big transition. And the way it was explained to me as an ignorant philosopher, I didn't know anything about the arts, they said that the college was transitioning from a fine arts institution into one that had to accommodate or even prioritize digital arts because they felt that this was the way of the future. And when I arrived here, painting was the big major, and that is less so the case right now, and for reasons that are evident, right? Painting and sculpture, big majors, and nowadays it's harder to sell those majors because it's harder to imagine what your job is going to be, right? And so there is an exact analogy to what we're talking about at other, liberal arts, what we call, other colleges, universities. The way this plays out at other universities is that the liberal arts are increasingly underfunded, and people major in business, accounting, biology, the fields they know plug right into a job. And again, how can you blame people when they are paying these ungodly tuitions, right? What is lost? What does she think is lost in the liberal arts education, though? When you don't have a robust, or when you don't have a liberal arts education at all, what does liberal arts education do for democracy in her view?
Allows us to hold democracy accountable.
It helps us hold democracy accountable. How?
Well, because we're not taking, actually, I was going to say we're not taking so much as rubes, but like actually there's an incredible amount of college educated white people who vote for Trump. And so I don't know if that's actually quite the answer. You can come back to me on that one.
Yeah, but maybe they're getting a neoliberal college education, Gabriel. That's what Wendy would say.
Let's say you're the game engineering person that is on track to become one of the engineers on like a slot machine or whatever.
Yeah.
You're doing your degree to do that, and then if you have a lack of liberal arts classes, I'm doing an analogy here that you would never really look up from your computing to be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Like, maybe perhaps if you were in a political philosophy class that was critiquing neoliberalism, you'd be like, wait, hold on, maybe I shouldn't be
nice
on the slot machine right now.
I like it. I'm on my phone here. I'm trying to find the major that I was talking about at Cecil Community College, and it's not coming up. Good. So you're preoccupied, and are you even going to take the kind of classes that call your attention to these sensitive issues? Okay. Anybody else?
Can I add on to like what we were talking about, Micah? And
Do it.
Add. In other classes, I've learned, tell me if this is different, but Micah started off as a design school that would prepare people to work essentially in a factory job. In the true like beginnings of Micah, it was like a design school that was like more like engineering, architecture, and like making like plans. And
yeah,
then
I mean,
movement towards the fine arts, and then like this is a slight regression or like a evolution into the digital realm, but it's kind of in the same.
Well, Micah is the oldest college in Baltimore, right? And when it started, I don't know about its exact origins, but since I've been hired at Micah, I meet people around town, and in Baltimore, by the way, they call it the Institute. Oh, you work at the Institute. And I have come across a lot of architects and engineers who study at the Institute. And so 50 years ago, this place was actually very career oriented. And then the fine arts people took over, right? And you don't come here for engineering anymore. And architecture was actually not really part of the system for a long time. And it's been reintroduced now. But ironically, Micah was very career oriented. It was not founded as a liberal arts school for sure. but it was not even, I think you're right, it was not even fine arts. And then it kind of has evolved. Ruben.
Yes, I would. I think the problem is it's the difference between like FIT and Black Mountain College. You know,
I don't know
FIT.
Black Mountain College. What's Black Mountain College?
So Black Mountain College was a school in the 30s, and it was basically an art school ran by artists.
Oh, okay.
And it was a place where there wasn't much of a curriculum. They basically taught them to be independent thinkers, independent artists. And that's the problem. Modern art schools don't teach that. They teach, it becomes a trade school. And the problem with that is trade school education is a means to an end.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really go there to learn anymore. You just learn, or you go there, like you said, to become whatever your major is.
Good. I like it. A trade school. I love that you put it that way. That is exactly, I think Wendy Brown would agree. Like, she would say this is what's happening to every school in this country. You know, I think Micah has become a trade school to an extreme degree, actually. I do think Micah has done a good job keeping a pretty robust, like, academic component. Like, you have to take all these classes. And a lot of you, maybe, do you guys have peers who say, like, why do I have to take all these academic classes? That used to be the case when I got here 15 years ago. There were a lot of people who were like, why do I have to take literature and philosophy and history? And, you know, Harley, you do hear that? Is that why you raised your hand?
I'm the opposite. The entire time I've gone to Micah, I've been like, I wish I was taking less studios. I don't know what I'm doing in my studios.
Well,
That's just my personal.
Harley, I know you, of course, you're like that. But I remember throughout, I've always heard people like, why do I have to take all, it doesn't pertain to what I'm doing in my art classes. And to which my response has always been, you know, my job is not here to get you a job. I mean, I'll help you get a job, don't worry about it. But it's not my main job. My main job is to make you free, or is to help you make yourself free. I'm Socratic, right? I don't teach. I ask questions. She goes on to say that, you know, the greatest thing that liberal arts education can give is humility. It's on page 189. That's all the way back to Plato. Socrates himself said, right, my wisdom is knowing what you don't know. And I like the point that Ruben said, like, yeah, college is not about finding answers. It's about finding the questions and understanding how to ask the questions and knowing which questions are the right ones to ask. That's the key point here, right? So I often tell students, like, if you came to me for answers, I have bad news for you. I'm not here to give you answers, right? I'm better equipped at asking questions and making you ask good questions. And that's the way you become free. And that has huge implications for what kind of citizen you will be. You will not be a yes man, right? Hopefully you will be able to navigate the glut of information well. You will be able to understand the sources of your information. You'll be able to judge them. That's all the important stuff, right? All right, let me pause there for a second. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Do you think the key component to this is, well, one component of it is if I had to compare my mind like Micah to an Ivy or like a USC or something, like those atmospheres, like when people graduate and they go off to lead successful lives doing whatever, or maybe they're in finances, or maybe they are like a filmmaker, they usually come back and they add on to the college or they make a humongous donation to it. And I'm not entirely sure if Micah can compete in the same level of, like, if we were competing, like, I don't really see a lot of painters coming back and doing as big donations like that, you know, or we won't be making enough people to do such a thing. So
Why are
it's
you raising this question, Gabriel? I'm not sure. I want to understand your train of thought. Why did that come to mind?
I'm not sure. I mean I'm comparing and contrasting it from like extremely neoliberal universities to Micah. I mean, if you want to do it simpler, I mean Johns Hopkins to Micah. That's like when you compare and contrast these campuses, like when you go to like their surrounding campus and like all the like resources that they have, you know, these are things that are like investments into the institution that will help it grow.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I wonder what the growth of Micah was, if like compared to that. I mean, we haven't matched that really.
Nope. I'm gonna just say one thing and then hand it on to people who've raised their hands here. I have a friend who works at Hopkins. I found at Hopkins they have 40 people working in their fundraising office. 40. That's a shitload. That's a lot of salaries, first of all. And that just says to me, how desperate is a school as rich as Hopkins? How desperate are they? If that's, you know, they need to have 40 people out there sucking for money all the time, right? There's something gravely wrong with this business plan. I think Chulmin had his hand up first, so you go ahead, Chulmin.
Oh, sorry, I pressed the wrong button.
Oh, all right. Ruben has his hand up again. No worries, go for it.
I was gonna reply to what Gabriel was just saying about like donations and donors. I think.
What's going on, man?
Okay, I don't know. It wasn't me, but so basically, I agree with what you said, Furman. That's the wrong business model. Is that schools are so worried about like the money coming in, they don't realize that. Forget about the money. How about we get like actual professionals or like people that actually want to be here to work? The problem is a lot of professors either one aren't as qualified as they say they are, or they don't care enough to.
I am. Just want everybody to know this. I am. Okay, but go ahead, Ruben.
Well, I was going to say, not everybody's like you, Furman. Not everybody has that idea of being a professor to help their students ask the right questions. You know, a lot of people come here just for a paycheck.
Yeah.
And I think this is big of an issue.
Now, a lot of professors are also, excuse my language, are douchebags, right? And they think they're hoity-toity, and you know, I think that's a problem too. Are you done, Ruben? Because Sarah has her hand up. Yeah, Sarah, go for it.
Ruben brought out a few things for me. I do also agree that I think it's really like a shame how trade schools, because of like institutions becoming more like Micah, becoming kind of like trade-esque, real trade schools have become like almost like existent anymore, and not nearly as like productive for like people in like lower socioeconomics classes to like get an education and get a good job. And then also something that stood out to me, thinking about like professors and like finances with colleges, is that like colleges just like have fully been like taken over by like the new kind of like neoliberal rationale. And I think that like it's like colleges should be definitely put on like the hot seat, because they are continuing to raise tuition and also like market towards people, and just like continue to reaffirm that we need to have this type of education in order to be successful. Sorry, I'm kind of like losing my track.
It's all great stuff. All right, let's get into it. Let's talk about why tuition's so fucking high. I'm going to preface, and I know we're at 5:45, so if you need to duck out, just go ahead. I went to college in 1990. My tuition at Boston College is one of the most expensive schools in the country now. It's like 60 grand. I paid $19,000 a year. And then when I was there, an alumnus told me that they had gone on, that this alumnus had graduated from Boston College in 1970, and that they had gone on strike, the students did, in 1970 because the tuition was so high, because they had raised tuition. Guess what they raised it to in 1970? It put people on strike. They raised it to $1,000. Okay? And the students marched out. Okay. Yes, Mason, you should put your hand in front of your face. Feel bad. It's crazy, but I don't blame you. You have so much wrapped up in this investment. You're not going to walk out on it. I get it. The real question is, why the inflation? There is hardly any other field in the American economy that has seen this kind of inflation from 20 grand to 60 grand today. I am terrified to think, here's some terror. Think about your kids in college. What are they going to pay? Is it going to be 80 grand, 100 grand? Why does this keep rising? What are the factors, y'all?
Is it something with loans? Sorry.
Hang on. There is an element there, but let's see what Chilmin has to say. Chilmin? Are you in mute, bro?
Backs up the loans.
Start over. You were on mute. Start over.
Oh, can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay. From my understanding, is that the government backs the student loans, and it yeah.
Do you want to say what the role that had?
Oh, the word I was looking for was it guarantees the student loans. So basically, it's like, how can you prove, you don't have to prove that you're going to have the money, a few $100 grand to pay off these debts. If you say it's for school, the government will back it. And so the colleges can demand these high prices.
Right. Awesome. Gia.
I was going to mention something a little bit more within each individual school where a lot of New York universities, for example, just as rent goes up, they make an excuse of we can raise it $1,000, a couple thousand a semester, and slap that number on the bill to every single student just because their rent went up by a little bit. But then when you take into account NYU, for example, the number of students that they have there is so much more than what we have here. So it's okay, everybody's paying a couple thousand more, but in reality, you have to multiply that by every student. And I feel they can get you in those little ways, as well as, like you were saying, when now they feel the need to hire 40 fundraising people, then they need to pay for those salaries and then all these new jobs and just different minors, majors, as new additions, what's it called? Leak, when they built Leak and then they made sophomores have to stay on campus more. All of those little things that just add up and make everything so expensive for no reason. And they think that they can slap an excuse on it and get away with it, and they do.
Good. Ruben.
I was gonna piggyback off of what Cholman was saying about the government being involved. It's basically a cycle. So since the government gives out student loans, the university ups the price of tuition that allows the government to give out the student loan. Well, that causes you to be in debt. So if the university is getting more money, that means in turn that the government is getting more money and that both parties are being compensated. So why would they, the question is actually more why wouldn't they raise tuition?
Good.
But I still all this doesn't answer where the fuck is the money going? Where's it all going?
My next question. My next question is
where's the breakdown? Why don't we have this shit public for all of us? I want to know. I remember I know that Micah doesn't publish their the professor salaries. It's one of the only art schools that doesn't. But I mean, we all learned.
You can get them. You can get them.
You can? Okay. Well, Sarah Dirty told me that at least a month ago that it was hard for her to pull them, and she's the chair of sculpture department. So I don't know what that's about. But I mean, and other government government, we can look at finances, but I don't know, where the fuck is the money going? Is my question. I don't understand. It should not be that difficult. And I've looked for any open stuff. I feel the only way we can figure out this stuff is if we all have to band together and do a strike, but that's not going to happen because you, like, the students here are not cohesive enough to form a body to do that. So like,
Well, take a walk around campus. You tell me, where's the money going, people? What do you see when you're on campus? You looked at schools. When you did tours, what were you shown?
Infrastructure,
Such as
Brown Building, fucking Gateway, Leak. That's all I can think of right now.
also you guys are not the most typical college population. Maybe you have friends in more traditional schools. What kinds of things do schools sell themselves on?
Labs.
Labs.
Sports teams.
I was gonna say, come on, with Ruben, nobody from the South here. It's like SEC, Big Ten.
Yeah,
Bullshit.
And LSU just got a new locker room, and it was like basically $1 billion locker room.
Mm-hmm.
But they made that decision because they know that the football team is what brings people to LSU. Nobody cares about LSU without the sports.
All right, Gabriel and everybody, you need to go online and look for the highest paid individual, the highest paid state employee in any given state is going to be the coach of the football team or the basketball team. Okay? The coach of the Maryland basketball team makes several $million. I believe he's the highest paid official in the state of Maryland. And that's going to be printed publicly. It's awful. It's horrible.
They're state officials?
They're state employees, Gabriel, because they're paid by the state of Maryland. University of Maryland's a public institution. So the coach of LSU, who is a big asshole I can't stand, he is a Louisiana state employee, and he is the highest paid official in the state of Louisiana. You can look this up. You are sold on cafeterias. You're sold on gyms. You are sold on fancy dormitories. The University of Texas built a lazy river for their students. You guys know what a lazy river is? What's a lazy river? And don't tell me it's a river that's lazy.
Basically, you get into a freaking tube and just go down the water. It's stupid as hell.
Yeah, because it's fucking Six Flags or some shit.
Isn't it some from an amusement park? It has a giant, it is a giant loop with a very steady flow. You get in there in your inner tube and you float along and drink some brewskis with your frat bros.
It is a matter of time before a frat brother dies in there.
That's not my problem. My problem is, what the fuck are they doing building lazy rivers, right? 2 years ago in the, I think it was the New York Times Magazine, they had a profile of the University of Cincinnati. That is a public institution. It was about the number of buildings that they had built on the campus that were designed by award-winning architects. Like top bill, like IM pay shit. University of Cincinnati. These schools are doubling and tripling down on ways to market themselves. And students get caught up in this. You know, the facilities, the way they look, that's what makes people decide, you know, or you know, what success do they have getting jobs for kids? Gia and Gabriel, I see your hands are raised. Did you guys want to say something? Either of you?
Oh, I think I left it.
Okay.
But I feel like, but Micah's facilities aren't even that nice, to be honest, and we don't have a lot of that stuff. I'm still confused. Like, I want to know at least our school's budget. And I think though another, like, I guess additional response is that there isn't any the market is supposed to bring competition and lower prices, but there isn't any competition. Like, people aren't choosing college really based on price, given that they can always get a loan for it. So, like, I'm not saying it's like on us or our fault, but if like if everybody's more cost conscious, then it wouldn't be a problem.
Let me say something. College economics are very complex. And I've had a hard time figuring them out for many years. But I've learned something. I'll tell you this much. There is, a school always has what is called a sticker price. And the sticker price is if you are full paying the full price of tuition. Most students never pay that full price. The college takes the money from the full paying students and they use that as financial aid for the others. Okay. The argument has come out several times in the last 10 years. Why don't you just lower that sticker price and make the whole thing more affordable for more people? You don't need to be jacking up that price and then using that surplus to then fund everybody else. Here's the problem. Every school so far that has actually reduced tuition has been punished in the marketplace. And when I say that, I mean they got fewer applications. So the market lesson is, don't fucking do it. Why is that? Some people have speculated it's because when a school lowers their tuition, it gives the impression that it's something that it is in desperation mode, and that it is somehow less estimable. And so schools don't want to do it. They don't want to do it, you know. It's unfortunate. So that's a major impediment to what you're talking about, Gabriel. That's a major impediment to schools lowering tuition, which I think is the only direction we got to go. You know, sooner or later, I think a school is going to successfully lower tuition and be rewarded for it. But I don't know when that will start. Harley?
Yeah, I think we should start with our own school. That's the easiest, best place to start. And then also, like, I want to talk smack about Sammy Hoy, but I also feel like I've only had vaguely positive interactions with him, and I know that the vice president, Mike Patterson, I think everyone has different experiences, but my personal experience with him, he's like offered to make appointments with me because I wanted to have his job. Like, he's been very nice to me. I think it's really hard to understand that there are people behind every single thing that happens. And then at the same time, these institutions need to be held accountable for what they're doing to their students, to the football teams, to the players, to the students, to the clubs, to, like, we do labor for them. We do the work. You know, the MICA exists partially because of all of the amazing artists that have come out of MICA.
Let me say two things. What is the alternative? I went to university, I did my graduate degree in Belgium at the University of Louvain. In the continental system, the universities are big and urban, and they do not have a campus. There is no gym. You have no advisor. You have no counseling services. You are on your own, okay? You live in an apartment. You go to class. The American system is very unique. The Anglo system, I should say, is very unique with this idea of a campus. Frankly, I think there are a lot of crazy luxuries involved in that. When I went off to college, my dad's an immigrant from Belgium. He said, this is prolonged adolescence. And he wasn't wrong, right? I went off, I partied in my comfortable dorm. My food was terrible, by the way. These colleges have really upped their game. About Sammy. The president, as far as other university presidents go, he's not actually outlandishly paid at all. You know, this is pretty par for the course. You should look at the President Hopkins. But that said, the coach of the lacrosse team at Hopkins makes triple what the president makes. So you're going to zero in on the president. Fucking coach, football coach is making more, okay? Big problem. My very humble opinion, very limited. One area, I mean, so Gabriel Jacobs, who's now I made him smoke too. God, this is going bad. Everybody, you know, where I see the money going. Do you need a cafeteria that has a faux bar, faux, P-H-O? Do you need that? Do you need a sushi chef? Micah's gym, not too outlandish. Check out Hopkins. Do you need a fucking climbing wall? Do you need a jogging path suspended from the ceiling, right? Do you need commissioned yoga classes? Do you need a counseling service, right? Do you need a career center? That's helpful.
I mean, we're supposed to be coming here to become adults, right? And so, like, I would love to, everyone loved to have paid less tuition and probably got, well, the thing is, like, because we don't have public health care, like having a public counseling center, right, should have been something provided by the government, not paid for by us,
well,
right? That you could.
Yeah, but Gabriel, if you went to college 30 years ago, these schools had nothing. They had none of this stuff. I liken it to an arms race.
Like, what's wrong with it? There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, it's going to have cost implications. That's my point, right? Right now, you guys have advisors. 20 years ago, faculty were the advisors, right? So we had to create a whole branch of advising. That costs money, right? And so it's kind of like an arms race. Like colleges create costs that then raise the tuition, but then we have to increase our services to justify the tuition. You know what I mean? Like, so it goes up and up. They chase each other. The costs and the services chase each other. And, it doesn't have to be that way, but it is. And, as you've noticed, paying attention across country, Micah is not an outlier at all. It's completely par for the course. Gabriel Ches.
If I may offer a big brain take.
I didn't realize what time it was, so do whatever you want to do, everybody.
Right. We're talking about, like, for the future generations, right? Like, what are our kids going to do when they go to college, right? I would have hoped, if I have kids, that the stigmatization of not going to college is somewhat eradicated, or at least I could, like, kind of push them that you don't need to subscribe to this. And I think there are tons of resources being made and given towards, like, the democratization of this education through the internet. So I'm and with this Zoom stuff, with this COVID stuff, I think it's kind of accelerating it to some degree, that even, like, neoliberals are being like, oh yeah, we can profit off this. But, like, it won't be to such an extent where you need to go to a place and then it's like the cafeterias and the sports and stuff. It's like, and at a bare minimum, if you want to receive knowledge and you want to be in a class, you can pay a subscription service to, like, a place, and it's like $500, or even, like, better yet, it's like $50 a month or something. And then, like, you receive classes from a person. Like, if I wanted to do for myself digital media classes, I could just go on Skillshare or, like, any other really thing. But that negates other things that you kind of that make us go to art school, such as knowing other people and a whole bunch of other things. Like, I like going to college and having a 4-year experience like this. It's kind of fun, but maybe we could change our minds, and hopefully that would happen for my kids. I don't know.
I'm going to hand this off to Ruben, but I'm going to say one thing. I often tell students in when I teach more traditional philosophy classes, I say to them, and this always causes stir, I say, this is the most important class you're ever going to take. And that sounds outrageous to people, but that's how Socrates meant it, right? Philosophy is not about a job. Philosophy is about happiness, and happiness is the most important thing. What I want to say is this, like, if anything happens like you're talking about, Gabriel, that's all fine and good, but there is an incredible value to the liberal arts college experience where you get to sit in a seminar and talk about things like this, okay?
But do I have to go through a school to do that? Is there a scenario where there's, like, a private group of 20 people all studying Socrates, and I could just go there and we can have great discussions? Like,
I don't know, dude. Good luck.
Well,
I have bad news. Sometimes you're going to need a guy with a PhD like me. Sometimes. Ruben.
You could just come with us, and it's like this great communal thing.
And I need money, so I need. Come on, you can't just keep me out there for hire, bro. Ruben.
I was gonna say, based on what Gabriel's saying, I wanted to bring back up Black Mountain College,
it was an independent school. Like it was not a corporation. It was not an institution. It was just a group of people that decided to get together and call themselves a school and teach what they knew. You know what I'm saying? I think that's where we should move. I don't think we should just discourage, going to school. I think we should discourage people from becoming part of institutions. I think we should encourage people to start their own schools.
Good luck, man. That's hard. That's tough. Are you going to get people who's going to go to your school as opposed to RISD or Micah or Psych, huh? I mean, that's
the thing. Black Mountain College had real artists. They had Rauschenberg. Like they had these people. They did have incentives to go to that school. It just wasn't facilities. You know what I'm saying? The problem is, all right, so say if I wanted to start a school, I would believe that I would have to be a fully successful artist, then start that school to have people want to come.
Good. In the chat here, I noticed that Harley raises the issue of benefits. It's true. Like if you were in a country like Canada where, you could, you didn't have to make sure you had a job with benefits, yeah, that opens up possibilities. It really does. And look, I'm very upset about the state of education in this country, higher education, because I think that liberal arts are getting it, being cut all over the place, and that's very unfortunate. This is precisely the kind of field that makes